When you start living with the end in mind, everything starts to change. What are people going to say about you? What message is your life going to speak when you're long gone? Because you weren't born by accident. You didn't just happen to be where you're at and happen to watch this video. There is always a reason.
Let's do this thing, guys. Welcome to the Fused Life Podcast. This is episode 129. As you know, we're all about God-given assignments and heaven coming to earth through you. And so my guest today is a good example of that, even though she might not think so. In my short time of being around her, there are things that I've noticed and gold that I've seen in her that hopefully we get to draw out in this conversation. Mel, I want to thank you for being here and honoring us with your time this morning.
Welcome. It's a pleasure, I think.
Yeah. So just quickly, obviously Mel is Geoff's wife. We had Geoff on yesterday. Some of you met him. And if you haven't, you want to go watch that podcast. It's called That Love Thing. And today we're going deeper in this conversation of being comfortable in your own skin and some of that journey and just having a real casual but serious conversation around growing in this journey with God. So Mel, why don't you just tell people a little bit about yourself, like what you do, where you are, and what you're about?
Sure. Well, present day, we're living in Mosgiel in the south of New Zealand. We have 4 children, all teenagers, and all living at home. So it's a full house, 6 of us and the dog. So I'm currently employed 30 hours a week. So juggling or having only entered the workforce again a year ago. So just managing that whole new stage of life, different season. But we've lived here for the last 14 years in this area. And so, that's home base for now.
Yeah. And so you're working 30 hours for...
Yeah, so I'm working in HR, which is not something I've ever done before. It was it's a whole story and how I ended up there. But I'm working in a social enterprise that employs people with disabilities. So my role is not a corporate HR role; it's more of a pastoral care role in many ways. Okay. But I'm dealing with recruitment and discipline, and it overlaps a little bit from some of my work history. But it is a whole new ball game, and there's been some. A bit of a growth curve in coming to grips with it.
Yeah. And so what do you do the rest of your time? Busy being mum, wife, anything else that you engage in?
Pretty much for now, looking after the family, being at home, trying to help out with some of the ministry side of things that Geoff and I are part of. So I'm active in Free Slaves and in just going here and there with Geoff when I can and helping out with getting books away, just doing what I can in the background to kind of keep things rolling along smoothly.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. Hey, just quickly, guys that are listening, I've got a couple of comments saying there's no audio. Can you just confirm that you can hear us? Let us know, guys. Okay. So I want to ask you a lot of random questions this morning, and hopefully it's okay. And anything you don't want to go into, we don't need to. But I'd love to know your thoughts on 2022, what's happened this year, how your year has been, and what maybe you've noticed in New Zealand or places you've been to.
Yeah, it's huge. There's just been so much huge changes this year, probably more so than I've ever noticed before. Huge shifts in the world. People are... there's been a lot of people that have been really distressed and stressed out by what's happening. And so, we've certainly found that the Lord's been connecting us with, in different ways with people that are searching and they're asking hard questions about life and re-examining things that are going on for them. So, we've been doing a lot of, spending a lot of time going places and talking about that and just trying to get a picture of it ourselves and working out what is the Lord doing? How do we respond in this time, in this age? Yeah.
And do you have any thoughts for next year? Anything that you feel like you're getting excited about, or is that not yet on the horizon?
It's such an exciting time. And I think we're just building and preparing and getting our own hearts ready and really pressing in to the Lord for more, because that's really where the only solutions lie, and we know that's the answer for the world. And so, but we've got to be convinced of it ourselves and living it. And so for us, I guess it's just about focusing on what the Lord's called us to do, to keep, charging on. We're really taking hold of the whole small group dynamic. So really trying to not just talk about it, but live it. And so that's part of the journey. And we're just seeing such amazing fruit in that area, and seeing people coming into that design of love and learning to love one another. And that takes time. You don't do that overnight or just with one sermon. You have to actually get out there and practice it.
So good. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think we've heard people talk about love in different ways, but really demonstrate it and make room for it is like it's costly, it's expensive. Like you have to lay your life down.
Yeah. You can't have it as a theory. It doesn't work. You'll never get there, and it will always just be this intellectual concept. But we can see that's not going to cut it. People can see straight through that. They just like, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be real, and it has to be something that people are attracted by and drawn to, which we know love is, but only if we're really, taken hold of it ourselves.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, you always strike me as someone who's very practical, simple, straightforward, So why don't we rewind back to maybe your early days? Like, did you grow up in a Christian home? Or what was your story like, and when did you get saved?
Yeah, okay. So I'm the oldest child in our family. I was born in 1975 in a little rural community. So my parents have a really stable marriage. We had such a safe, kind of idyllic upbringing, really, in a small rural town. Lots of community support. Was just a really safe sort of happy childhood. Have a younger sister and a younger brother. My parents aren't actively following the Lord. My mum does come from a family of missionaries, but she, through circumstances in her own life, just hasn't actually embraced that for herself. But my parents, like I really honor them for the life they gave us. They did the best with what they knew. And so we had I was really shy as a child, very quiet, shy little girl. And so I'd spent a lot of time hiding behind my mum's skirt, and I had to be bribed with gold stars at the school gate to go to school. But our childhood was pretty blessed in many ways, and we had a good extended family and lots of holidays, and just there was no neglect, or like a lot of people's stories are really broken from those early days. That wasn't really my experience, because of the way my mum and dad operated, love was sort of a implicit thing, not really anything that was demonstrative. So I really had a growing kind of emptiness as I got older, because I hadn't seen love modeled in an emotional way or in a physical way. And so that which is really all part of the story of my life. But by the time I got to my teenage years, I wasn't a Christian. I'd only ever been in a church now and again. Mum was on a church cleaning roster, because in a small community, everyone helps with everything. Yeah. So for some reason, Mum was on the cleaning roster for the church. We'd go down there occasionally. My sister and I would play in the church, but it was I always remember it being quite a foreign feeling. Like I go in there and it was I suppose it would be like a holy feeling. And I always felt like, we shouldn't touch things. We have to be careful. And I was so curious about it, but I had no idea what it was about. I couldn't understand why it felt that way. But we would just read the hymn books and get up and pretend to preach at the pulpit. Not that we had any clue about spiritual things at all. But in my early teens, my sister was going out with a guy, and his family were Christian, and they invited both of us to this concert. It was like a traveling ministry. They did drama and song. I can't actually remember the name of it, but we went along, and of course they did a gospel presentation and then an altar call, and my sister just went straight up the front. and I was sitting there. Well, I was really impacted. Like, it was the first time I'd heard the gospel. I'd heard some Bible stories growing up, but never really thought about a personal relationship with God. So when my sister went up, I was sitting there thinking, oh, should I go too? But in my heart, I was like, man, if I'm going to make that decision to give my life to God, I need to be 100% sure about it. I can't do this on a whim, or it's got to be, it has to be a serious decision. So I sat there, and part of me was thinking, I wonder what mum and dad are going to say about this. I think I'll wait for my sister to tell them, and then I'll look at that reaction and then decide how it goes after that. So I came home, dug out an old Bible that I had been given at primary school, and I had a gospel tract, and that was about it. So I thought about it for some weeks and just mulled it over. And I guess it's that scripture about counting the cost. If you're going to go on, you want to be sure that you can complete what you start. And I was really aware of the kind of the bigness of this decision. And eventually one night I just was sitting on my bed, and I grabbed this tract, and I just said, right, Lord, yep, I'm in. And I read this, just read it. There was no choirs of angels or open heaven or any kind of like supernatural experience. I just read this thing out like making a contract. And that was it. That was the start of my journey with Jesus. But
wow. How old were you at that time?
I was just not quite 16. Yeah, my sister was 14. So and then we joined a youth group, and it all went from there. But I was just so hungry as a baby believer. I wanted to know everything about God, and I would just grab I read every book in the library, in the church library. I would tune in my radio to Radio Rema and sign up for correspondence courses, and I would just, any Christian I meet, I would grill them about God, and I just, I was so hungry to grow.
Yeah, to me, that is supernatural. I think a lot of times we like the supernatural to be spectacular, but the supernatural is so much deeper than that,
Oh, the hunger he put in my heart over those early years, I just couldn't get enough. Couldn't get enough of God.
Yeah. And so you go down this path, and how did you meet Geoff, or what happened? Did anything happen before you met Geoff, or you guys met pretty early?
Yeah, so I finished high school, went off to university in Dunedin, moved out of home, and met Geoff in my first year at university, because we both ended up getting involved in Christian ministry on campus, the student ministry. And so we knew each other, but we were not mixing in the same circles really at that time. So it was kind of a distant, just an acquaintance. And my first impressions of Geoff were, man, this guy's so intense. I thought I was like committed to the Lord, but he was like next level, just deep, and I was so emotionally shut down that I didn't really know how to connect with people like him. He just seemed like, man, you're just out there. So our relationship really developed as a friendship over a number of years, because as people finished up their degrees and left Dunedin, your friendship circles just shrink and get smaller and smaller. And we were in the same church, and so by the time I was in my final year at uni, it shrunk down to just a smallish group, and we became a lot closer. And we were by that time doing some groups together and working together a lot more closely. So it just sort of started to grow. There wasn't a moment where I just suddenly thought, man, I'm in love with this guy. It just slowly developed, and then
Sure. So what were you studying at uni?
So I did law, and I never really wanted to be a lawyer, or I didn't really think that far ahead. I came out of high school knowing that I love history and I love English. Law sort of felt like a good fit. And I knew that I'd do the first year papers and then have to apply to get into law school. So my kind of thinking at that stage was, Lord, I want to do your will. I want to walk in your purposes for my life. I didn't know how to hear God's voice at this time. So I was sort of operating on the theory that, Lord, if you want me to become a lawyer, you'll have to get me into law school. And it was sort of just, we'll see what happens. And so I did get in, and then I continued on and finished my law degree. I actually worked I was admitted to the bar. I worked in law in that area for 3 to 5 years or so.
Wow.
but I never, I loved parts of the job, but I didn't actually feel called to be a lawyer. I think the Lord used that as part of my, just part of the story of my life. But at the end of the day, the actual corporate legal world, I just had so many issues with that.
Yeah. But would you say that maybe you have a heart for injustice or something like that
Yeah, I do think that's part of it. The Lord has talked to me about that. I do love justice. I love that the Lord is just, and that justice and righteousness are the foundations of His throne. So there definitely was. And my grandfather was, he actually studied law once he retired, and he was a minister, and he retired, did a law degree, and then it's there in the family, and I've just I did love that, and I always have had that heart for justice. So I do think that's probably, and I look back now, and I've used my law degree so much in my life. It comes up all the time. The skill set that I got, during those years, I just constantly, am drawing on that. So I don't see it as a waste of my life, but it was just probably like as a vocation, probably not quite the right fit.
Yeah. So what happened there with Geoff? How did you guys meet, and how did you stop doing law?
Yeah. So, interestingly, that as time went on, and we were in a student church, and we were spending a lot more time together, and we had a small group, and Geoff was running it, and he had a number of leaders. We were all working together. He was writing the studies, and we were delivering them in a big kind of, as part of a student sort of ministry. It was such an amazing year, and the friendships that we formed just got tighter and tighter and deeper, and we were really focusing on loving God. And this was quite a new thing for us. We'd never heard people talking about coming into a revelation or an experience of what it was like to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love others, and for that to be the whole focus of your life. It was like we'd never really heard people talk about that. So we were on this journey that the Lord was just giving us all this awesome revelation, and we were coming into it together. And so for me, as far as Geoff and I getting together, I'd been in a relationship for about 3 years, which had ended a little while earlier, and he had some other relationships. But I remember having a conversation with the Lord, and Him saying, "What kind of future are you looking for?" Because I could see, having done my law degree, I could get a job, I could have a really good life, a great life in the world, chase after the things of the world, and I had friendships with other men at that time, just that I could see could have had, potential to go in different directions. And I was sort of weighing all this up and going, God, what do you want for me? And I felt like the Lord said that, well, certainly when I imagined a future with Geoff, I thought, this is the biggest risk I'm ever going to take in my life. Like, I'm guaranteed to have a life that is not ordinary. I just knew that. I'm like, can I do that? Because I was such a play by the book sort of person, and I was a bit of a control freak, and I loved structure and routine, and Geoff was nothing of that. He was just, let's do what the Lord says, and I was like, this is gonna be interesting. But the Lord spoke, and it was so clear to me that the Lord was saying, this other life, tempting, but not for you. You're never going to be fulfilled in that. I want you to take a risk and jump in, and I've got something far greater. So we ended up getting our the time between when we kind of just felt the Lord speaking in this way. We were only engaged for 3 months, married. 6 months later, we were off to Ireland, and it was a bit of a whirlwind kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's any part of that story you want to touch on. Geoff yesterday talked a little bit about your time there, and so you got pregnant and you guys had your first child there, or all your kids there, or what happened?
No, just the first. We got there, and we were on one-way tickets. We had zero money. I found an amazing job in a law firm covering a woman on maternity leave, funnily enough. And then, so we were just sort of seeking God. We knew why He sent us there. We were just looking to get established. And then I wasn't feeling that great, and we didn't have internet like accessible like we do now. So we had to go to the local library, and we were searching on the internet at the library what could be wrong. And we didn't really have money to go to doctors. And I was like, I just don't feel right. And one of the websites we came across said, oh, you should take a pregnancy test. And I'm thinking, that's kind of, well, okay, well, we could do that. They had a social services building, you get a free test. I was like, oh, let's eliminate that, So we went down there and it came back positive, and we were so unbelievably shocked. We were like, how'd this even happen? Like, this natural family planning thing's supposed to work. So we went to a park and we sat there for about 3 hours in utter shock. Like, it was just such an unexpected surprise to be pregnant at that time. It didn't feature in the plan for that year or any other year beyond at that point. So, and I was already in this job, just about to start, and I was thinking, Lord, what are you doing? But it was an unbelievable blessing, and to have our first child in Ireland was really cool. And it was. I look back now and I'm like, man, if the Lord hadn't have surprised us in that way, we probably never would have got around to starting a family. We would have been so focused on other things. So yeah.
So what were you looking to establish when you say you wanted to establish stuff? What did you feel like you were going to do in Ireland?
Yeah. So overall, the overarching call is, from the time we got together, was prepare a bride. Your call is to prepare the bride. We didn't even fully know what that meant, but we were growing in that understanding. But going to Ireland, it was interesting. The word the Lord gave us is, I'm sending you to Ireland for one person. And we were like, one person? Like, we're going to uproot our entire life for one person. Wow. And the Lord said, I want you to understand that I leave the 99 to go after the one. That's how much I value the one. So good. Yeah. Nothing for me to send you to the other side of the world for one. Are you willing to do that? And so we went to Ireland to look for the one, and we found him. It was a young guy, and the Lord just connected us, and we spent a long time while we were there just discipling this young man and sowing into his life, and the Lord did 101 other things during that year as well. Before I got pregnant, I was praying and I was like, Lord, I really, really want to become more selfless and patient. Those two things. I journaled it, these are the two things I want, Lord. And then I get pregnant, and man, if you've had a baby in your family, you know how much those two areas are stretched, so it was an answer to prayer in many ways.
Yeah. So you guys were doing a small group at uni, and maybe this is good that we just go in and out with this conversation like that, but small groups, even now there's a lot of, I don't want to say stigma, but people say, like, what church do you belong to? What denomination? Who's your covering? And so at that time, for you to do these small groups and stuff, like, did you have people from the outside kind of trying to talk to you and talk you into things, or what was that like?
Yeah. So we were part of a student church, and part of a student ministry, so on campus. So we had, at that time, we sort of were operating within those structures. The small groups were happening at church or as part of our student ministry. So it was all quite acceptable, and it was sort of all, that was fine. It got a little more tricky when we started to question the expression of Christianity and the institution of Christianity as we know it in our day, and realizing, some of the things that we see in the institutional church, the hierarchies, it started to raise questions, and we were going, Lord, what's the design? This coming together to love one another. How do we do this? And does it always have to happen within a church? Because in many ways, the small group model for churches is peripheral. It's, you have your Sunday meeting, and then there might be small groups happening during the week, but they're sort of like, for a lot of churches, part of just the routines of the church, but they're not fundamental. Yeah. And so we started to come into this place of going, but the small groups are like the most important. That's where the growth happens. That's where the relationships are formed and deepened. And it's where accountability and vulnerability and all of those things come into play. and in this year we've been looking at the ecclesia and how much that comes into operation through people loving one another in these close connected little families of faith. And so that brought us into, we were a bit conflicted as we journeyed through, how does this look? And like I neither of us are anti-church, but we're just all about how do people come together in these connected, really strong relationships.
Yeah. So I guess I've been through a similar kind of thing, and now we're small group conversation going on here too, has been for like 6 or 7 years. But why do you think the small groups, like you and I both know how powerful they are, right? To take someone deeper into the Lord and understand their journey. Why do you think there is like a resistance to these groups, and why it's not the normal mode of operation? You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think that's deeply rooted in history, in the formation of the church and the way it's developed, and there's a I guess sometimes a control issue. People like the familiarity of a structured sort of expression of faith, and there's I guess the enemy's had a part to play in it to bring people into something that feels and looks like it's religious, but it lacks the substance. And so there's so many people sitting in churches feeling like they're ticking the boxes, but there's no substance to it, and they're really isolated and very, very empty and an infants in their faith. So I think for so many reasons that small group thing's never really taken hold, because it's so it's so hard to control, and everyone there's all this, people perceive that if you're operating outside of a structured hierarchy, that you're going to go off the rails, or that it's not a valid expression of faith. We've seen the church, the institution, is the only real valid expression of our faith.
Yeah.
And even now, most people in the world, if you ask them what it means to follow God, they'll say go to church. So the church has had a monopoly on relationship with God, and people have watched what's happened in churches and then get put off because it's broken humanity messes it up, and so they write off God because they've written off the church.
Yeah. And when we say church, we're meaning the system, the structure that we've seen, not the ecclesia, like we'll probably talk about soon. But very interesting. And so during that time, did you have anybody come support you, like walk with you, or was it pretty much just you guys? And
apart from the one at that time, the ones we were that around our age actually, and some others that came along, we kind of went through quite a wilderness experience for probably a good 10-15 years. We kept looking for this bride. We were trying to find this bride, where are these people that want to love God and devote all of their lives to him? And we were seeing it in the scriptures, the Song of Song type relationship where Jesus becomes everything, and we just couldn't find these people. We were looking for them, and sometimes we'd go into churches or we'd go different places, and we'd be you'd instantly know, there's a resonance when you meet someone and you're like, you've got the same heart, you're chasing this too, you want something more from the Lord. And so we were constantly trying to reach out and connect and find, but it really was a huge season of wilderness. And I think in many ways the Lord took us to that place because he did a huge amount of work in our lives through that. And we had a young family. We were learning a lot ourselves, and Geoff was writing, but his writing took years to really come to the place where it's now. So there was so much going on behind the scenes, and so much the Lord was doing in us. We just weren't always, but it was always like that never changed, that we want to find this bride. We want to connect with this bride and live this life.
Yeah. So maybe we quickly touch on the bride. Who is the bride? What is the bride? Like, is every believer the bride? You get saved and now you're the bride. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a bit like, when you're born as a child, you grow up. You have to mature. Even in our natural understanding, we would never think of a child as a bride. Marriage is not something that you understand as a baby. And when you come to know Jesus, you don't have the intimacy with him. It would be like going into an arranged marriage. It makes no sense. So we've always seen this journey of faith where we start out as a born again baby, and we get to know God in different dimensions of relationship. He's Lord, he's Savior, he becomes your provider, your shepherd, your friend. You journey through all these different ways of getting to know God, and the bride is really just, it's another dimension of relationship that the Lord wants to have with us. But just like a marriage, when you make vows on your wedding day that you're going to love this one person for the rest of your life exclusively, that's a game changer. You don't just suddenly wake up the next morning and go back to being single. It's changed everything. Yeah. So that bride relationship is so powerful, and it just brings you into these new dimensions of intimacy, which we see that's what when you read through John 17 and you read of his heart for his people, that's the kind of relationship he wants to have. That's the relationship he wanted with Israel, to take her as his bride, and for us to experience that love flowing through the Godhead, through our lives back to him. And it's the ultimate fulfillment of our design. The whole Bible is that story of marriage and intimacy. So I guess we just see that as carry on.
No, I'm just going to say, like, there is a preparation element to that, right? There is a posture to that. It's not just something you on a whim just say, okay, I'm the bride, like. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? Like, what are some things that you feel are a part of this journey?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in Christian circles long enough to know that the name it, claim it kind of thing has been really popular, and yet because the bride journey, it's relational. You just can't name that and just suddenly be there with it. There's just like Esther being prepared for a whole year to meet the king. It's like that. The Lord takes us on this journey of preparation, and it's not a physical preparation in that we get all glammed up. It's a preparation of the heart, and he has to, address those areas in our lives where we've got other idols or other loves. There's a purifying, there's a devotion element to it where I guess that's just part of the coming to that place where you feel that you can make that commitment to him. I mean, the bride is not. It's just the making that it's becoming devoted to Jesus. That he is your first love, and so it's not a status, or you become part of some group because you're in that place. It's just to me, it's just a maturing of relationship with that ultimate intimacy and unity with him that he's always wanted us to have.
Yeah, and you cross that line the line of no return.
That's right.
When I first got saved, probably a year in or two in one worship service, I remember Jesus holding a ring in front of me, and I never talked to people about it because you don't hear this talked about much.
No.
And I'm a macho guy, especially at that time, I'm like a macho guy. I'm like, this is not public information, but there was such a drawing to this love, and I love that we're talking about this, But let me, I want to ask you some questions. So I was listening to David Hogan. You know who that is, David Hogan? Yeah. And he's talking about his journey and his wife, Debbie Hogan, who's this woman who's there and her calling and his calling. So a lot of times when I see couples going about things, I always wonder what it's like for the wife's side of things, like even for my wife. You know, I'm here thinking, oh, it's like this. And then she'll say something and I'm like, whoa, like I didn't even really see it, even though I was a part of it, you know?
Yeah.
So what was that like for you? So you're in Ireland, now you're pregnant, then you end up having these kids, right? And then you're going to live by faith, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of women say security is so important to them. Was that important to you? And what was that like to journey out of that security into faith?
Yeah, huge journey. And the Lord tackled things, you know, little by little. And so in lots of those different areas, yeah, it was, I guess, we had this understanding of our call, but how that works out and how each of us have embraced that, and it's, you know, it's been revealed. It's been quite, so I think, you know, you go into marriage thinking that you're becoming one, and that in some ways you're going to become the same. And it took me a long time to realize that becoming one is not becoming the same. I can't be Geoff and he can't be me. But I struggled a lot at the beginning because I was feeling like I had to change to become like Geoff, you know, and I wasn't like Geoff. And so that I wrestled with that because I'd feel, you know, I'm not enough. I can't do the stuff he does with, and then the family was all the, you know, the pressures and the just what it requires of you to give yourself to children. It's huge. So there was a huge journey. The provision realm, living by faith, that was a bit of a challenge for a while. Initially, I stopped looking at the bank accounts. I just had to hand that over to Geoff and say, this is not healthy for me to keep tabs on the finances because, you know, because I was kind of, you know, I being a bit of a control freak at that time, it was really hard to, you know, to trust in that realm and have no security. So first I stopped looking at the bank accounts. Then I would just, there were times I do remember one particular day going for a bushwalk with the Lord, and I was feeling so heavy around the finance thing. I was like, God, you know, it can't get much worse. We're in this desperate situation. How are you going to come through? I don't know if I can do this life. It's so, you know, I'm feeling all this anxiety and I'm starting to stress that we're going to be bankrupted and what's going to happen, you know? So I was walking along just feeling so weighed down by all of this, and the Lord spoke. It's one of the few times that I've just, you know, you just know in your heart, and the Lord has just really revealed something. And he basically, the dialogue was, Mel, if I offered you or offered most people a guaranteed income or living by faith, what do you think they'll choose? And I'm like, they're totally going to choose the guaranteed income, you know. And he goes, exactly. He goes, but dependency brings intimacy, and I want you to be thankful for this gift. And that was such a powerful word for me, because my whole perspective changed. Suddenly I was like, okay, I've got to be thankful that the Lord's given this lifestyle to us as a gift, and that the dependency on him that's being cultivated is going to bring forth a greater intimacy. And that's what I want. That's been the goal from the beginning. So that changed things. And so I started then just relaxing, and I'd go shopping and I'd take the card, and I wouldn't have looked at the bank account, so I have no idea whether there's money there or not. And I would just start to listen to the Lord, and I'd just trust my discernment. So if I felt to buy something, I'd buy it. If I felt a check, I wouldn't. And I just started operating this way. And then I was free to give and free, and I had no, you know, wasn't constrained by what the figure was in the account. So that was part of that journey of provision. But yeah, we went through a lot of sifting, a lot of pruning, a lot of I guess just finding ourselves, finding our identity. And I had to really learn what it was to how the Lord's made me, and I'm not Geoff.
Yeah.
We joke a little bit that he's that I'm the brake and he's the accelerator.
Yeah. And that's probably similar at my house, you know, and you need both for a well-functioning car, you know.
But, yeah, that's exactly right.
Before we talk about you being a control freak, because I think that'd be a great conversation, you know, I think it's so good when you talk about what God revealed to you, because when people go through the finance conversation and it's a religious thing, they usually say things like, well, God is testing me so I can kind of earn this breakthrough, or, and we start to talk about the finance realm like it's separated, us and God, and he has to pour into here and he's got these rules and stuff. But when it becomes about the intimacy, it's a total different paradigm. And now when money's not showing up like you think it should, the response is so different, right?
Yeah, fully. Yeah. The Lord was like, this, it all belongs to me. So you don't have to stress about what you will wear or what you will eat or where your clothes will come from. Just, seek first the kingdom, really, really build the relationship with him, and all those other things will come. I keep being reminded of the story of Ruth, where the Lord provides and protects, and those are such fundamental promises. And so it was for a time, then the bills would come in, I just cross them out and I just write Jehovah Jireh, God will provide. I just wouldn't look at them.
There you go. There's some strategies for you guys looking for strategies. But there's so many gold nuggets just in this last half an hour. I hope you're catching them, guys. Like, these are actually really practical, awesome gold nuggets, So if you're here listening and this finance conversation is happening for you, and with COVID and the freak out of what's going to happen with the financial crisis and all that kind of stuff, and you're looking at money separately, like not you and God in intimacy in a situation, but you and God, and you want God to do something and he's all the way there, you might want to address some of that,
Yeah.
So Mel, coming back to your story, so security is a big part, but did you have any other elements where, like maybe on this call where you're looking after your kids and Geoff's had to go away and, and you're kind of holding the fort? What was that like? Was it challenging at the beginning?
Yeah, it really was challenging because I felt forgotten. I felt like Geoff's going off and doing the call and I'm at home looking after the kids, and he's away having all these amazing experiences, and I'm just doing washing and feeding kids and, baths. And it was just like this routine that felt so mundane. So there was a long period where I really struggled, and then but the Lord's taken me through that. And one of the most beautiful things he did, actually only a year or so ago, is he said to me, Mel, if you would let go of all your expectations, then I will fill your cup. And I knew he was speaking of my expectations of Geoff and of our, of how we would relate while he was away, and and when he'd come home, it was almost a feeling like, man, you've been away, you've had all this good time, now you better come home and help me because I've had to work so hard and I'm tired. And it was never sort of openly expressed that way, but I think that's how it was in my heart. And so the Lord really challenged me, and I had to, and so I was like, okay, I'll if that's the deal you're offering, I'll take that. So I started to just bless Geoff when he was away and just have no expectation of him, and trust that the Lord would meet my needs in that place. And he has been so faithful with that. But it has taken a bit of a journey and lots of ups and downs, having to go back to the Lord and work through some of that resentment and a little bit of feeling, like I'm just peripheral and not really part of this call. It's, even though we talk about it being a we thing, I don't know if I couldn't always see that. It was like a Geoff and then a Mel when we're supposed to be one, but it didn't feel like one. So it's been definitely a big roller coaster to come to the place of recognizing, what I'm doing here at home is just as precious to the Lord as what Geoff's doing when he's away. And the way he's put us together, we complement each other, and we have completely different skills and strengths. And I guess it's because we have a big focus in the church on what you do rather than who you are. And the Lord has really pulled me up on that. He's like, your life is not about what you do. It's all about who you are and who you become. And so when I started to focus on that, it took away a lot of that comparison and competitiveness and the feeling of lack. All of that started to just sort of drop away when I really started to go, okay, this is, in this place at home, I can be ministering to the Lord. I can be growing in him just as much as if I was out doing other things on assignments, much as that is fun too.
Yeah. And that's such a good conversation, good point. I was saying to Kirsten, and this is one of my passions, is like when women end up, in that cycle of having babies and staying home and raising the kids, and that feeling, I guess, has been taught through different church life that you're not in your calling and you're just doing this thing, then you got to come back in the game, like you got off the field or something. But for me, it was like I watched my wife mature and morph into love in another dimension so fast, because a mother's now waking up at 3, at 1.
Yeah.
That is like laying down your life to the max. It's like, you know, and so I watch mums actually become love, but maybe they don't hear as many sermons or read as many chapters. And so they feel like, oh, I just wasted this time. Do you want to touch on that?
Because you don't see fruit in the way that you expect to see fruit in the, in the body. Like, so you're not seeing salvations and testimonies of healing and encounters with God when you're home changing nappies. You can't, the growth of a little child happens over a long time. So I fully relate to that. And I think I can understand that many women haven't understood and embraced that call to love family and society doesn't value it either. So you're getting that message in many different ways. So I remember so often being asked, when are you going back to work? As if being at home with the children was not really a valid job. It was you're just watching soaps all day or something, So it's definitely a place that's it can be really hard because it's invisible and it's much of what you do is just, it feels like so insignificant to the kingdom of God.
Yeah, man, this is a good conversation. Hopefully some mums are listening and will relate. But I want to touch on this control freak thing because I can't even imagine you being a control freak after meeting you a few times, So what's the deal there? What happened? What did control freak look like for you back then?
Control freak was Geoff used to laugh at me and say, Mel, we have to schedule in spontaneous time. I think that really came from my upbringing. Both my parents are wired that way. My dad was an air traffic controller, for goodness sake. So, there was, and when you don't walk with the Lord, I guess you take control of your own life. And so that was a really strong thing I just grew up with. And when I came to the Lord, it took me a long time to be able to release control of my own life and of my destiny and of my future. And, it had infiltrated so many different areas. I guess it was my way of being safe in relationships if I had control. So the Lord had to strip me of it. And I went through, a season of real heartache. It was really hard to give up control, and because the Lord said you can't have love and control together; they don't coexist. The Lord never operates through control. So if you're trying to live this life of love, you've got to lay down control. They can't coexist together. So there was a few battles in coming to that place. Surrender. It was just a constant journey of surrender and going back to the Lord and saying, God, this has happened. How do I respond? How are we responding? And just really listening in for his voice to lead me through that. Because if it's a default in your psyche or in your personality, having your mind renewed, it just takes a bit of time. And I needed to take that to the cross, and the Lord had to rip it out of my life. But then there was a big journey of coming into something different.
Yeah, man, that is so good. And I think understanding that the control is because of the fear is a big thing. Hey? Like a lot of people don't relate that, but they're actually scared. So we need to control as much as possible.
Yeah. And for me, fear was probably the biggest enemy in my life. And I remember the day the Lord set me free from that, and I was standing at the top of a high ropes course in Rotorua at JH, where you were earlier in the year. I was on a camp with my daughter, and I was clinging onto the pole at the top, absolutely shaking in fear, and I'm not really scared of heights, but this was really high. And the thought of walking out on this wooden log, I was just petrified, and my everything in me was just terrified. And the guys down below were encouraging and saying, "Come on, Mel, you can do this." And I'm drowning. The voices were just drowned out. I'm in this moment with the Lord, and He just said to me so clearly, "You have to step out into the fear, and I'll meet you there." And
Wow.
I wrestled in that moment. It was the longest moment of my life, just deciding, can I do that? And I eventually I did, and it was almost like a deliverance for me doing that, because I realized later that the scripture says when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you will fear no evil. And there's a walking, you don't, some stuff you can't just face by declaring something or saying a prayer. It was like the Lord said, I want you to step into that, and I'll meet you there. And He did. And that was that was a really powerful moment of release for me. And fear, while it lurks in the background sometimes now, it doesn't have that place of dominance. So the control stuff could all fall away as well. And I just have to be vigilant in that area.
That is so good. I just started imagining myself up there, and I'd probably freak out too,
It was freaky.
Yeah. So teenage kids, I know JH is doing a great job, and hopefully one day I'll do a podcast with Chris on that subject. That'll be powerful. But what's that like now to raise teenage kids? What has that been like for you?
Yeah. A different transition, because they're so much more independent. But they still need a home base, and they still need parents that are available. And I think the temptation is, as they get older, is you start to gain back more of your life, and you're more free. But I've been reminded by the Lord, and He gave me a word, which was, I don't want you to do a late-term abortion on your family. That was a really convicting word for me, because now that the kids are old enough to look after themselves at home, the temptation is for me to go off and travel with Geoff, and there's always all these amazing opportunities, and go here and go there. And yet I feel very strongly the Lord saying, be careful. I don't want you to to leave your post too early, because they, even though the kids can do a lot for themselves, they still need the input and the supervision a little bit, or just the guidance that parents bring, coaching. And I almost think that the Lord's in some ways got me and returned to the workforce, not full time, but because it keeps me at home. I can't freely disappear off quite so easily. But that's been even, and teenagers are amazing. They're challenging because you're finding themselves. But wow, watching your kids, become adults and mature is a beautiful thing.
Wow. I don't know how many people would say teenagers are amazing, but
they are amazing. They stretch you in ways you've not been stretched before. Like, the demands of young children, when they're fully dependent on you, are different from the demands of teenagers. That they just challenge us in different ways.
Yeah. Man, this has been so good. We're nearly at an hour already, by just hearing you and the Lord and your journey with God and different elements of your life. I think it's so powerful. I definitely think you should have your own podcast, Mel. I'm saying it on a podcast, because there are subjects that I think you would bring to light that everybody is living, but no one talks about because they're not sexy, they're not the in subject, That's so. Have you been to Pakistan? What was that like, your first time going? And do you want to touch?
I haven't actually been to Pakistan. I would love to get to Pakistan. I guess the problem's always been that to go to Pakistan, you can't just do that in 1 week. You need to be there for several weeks, and then it's a week. It's a big trip either side. So Geoff's been a couple of times. I've only really been there via Skype. You know?
Yeah.
So one day I will hope to hit the ground in Pakistan, but for now, my involvement tends to be through digitally and just, you know, managing the website and doing stuff from here remotely. But yeah, it will be amazing to go there at some point.
Yeah. So have you been on any trip? Have you gone to any place yet or not yet?
Yep. We've done some trips together. We've been to Hawaii, which was awesome. It was just an amazing time. We've traveled quite a bit within New Zealand to different things together. We've been to Tahiti together for some stuff, ministry stuff. We traveled a little bit before we came back to New Zealand, so into the Middle East, and just loved some of those places, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, that sort of thing. So, but the season of having family, and as anyone with kids knows, like when you've got 4 kids, it's you know, logistically that's pretty hard getting everybody all around the place. So for the last 15 to 20 years, I haven't done as many overseas trips, you know, with Geoff, but we've tried to do what we can together, and certainly the opportunities are growing now. But we just take things as they come up and just pray about them and try to work out, are we both to do this or just you, just me?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, everyone's journeys and how they're so different, you know, and there's no one formula or one way to do something. So when Geoff's doing all this writing, what was going on for you at that time as he's just learning how to write a book?
Yeah. I was doing a lot of proofreading. So he would, you know, he'd print some stuff out and he'd throw it at me, and I'd go through it with a pencil, and we'd talk about it, and then he would go away and write more. A lot of the time I was trying to keep the kids from interrupting him because, you know, that he worked from home, so, you know, he was constantly available, in the kids' minds at least. So I was trying to sort of give him space to do that, because writing is, you have to be focused. It's really hard to write when, you know, there's all this other noise and things going on in the background. So just trying to free him up with that. But in saying that, the writing really, really evolved. It wasn't like the Lord just downloaded it all at one time. And I guess it's because so much of it has to do with living it and having the experience to be able to, and the testimony to be able to write of those things.
So what's that been like for you now to see the book go out, and obviously you're involved in the background, and maybe people writing testimonies or reading the books, and anything stand out to you of this journey?
Oh, I think it's beautiful to see people so blessed by the revelation and to come into it for themselves. Like, so there is no glory for us in in how many books we send out, or we just want to see people come into the same dimension of relationship where they make that commitment to love God with all their lives, all their being, and then experience it, you know, come into these dimensions of love and intimacy. So for us, that's the joy is in when people, you know, if we get feedback on the books and people have had an encounter with Jesus and they've gone deeper with him, that's the fruit, you know, then there's such a joy in that. So yeah, that's how it becomes so fulfilling to see that all those years we're just sowing, you know, for a harvest that we're only really just starting to see a little bit of now. But at the end of the day, we don't really, it's not of any interest to us to have numbers or, you know, success in the world. We just want to see people, we want to prepare this bride.
Yeah, that is so good. And there are obviously a few people who are reading the book here in the comments, and guys, we're going to put a link up. You can go check them out. The books are free. And obviously the hope is that you don't just read this book, but you step into the reality of everything that the book is opening, you know? So if you guys got any questions, throw them up here. Mel loves spontaneous questions. The more harder, the more complex they are, the more she's going to love it. So throw some questions in there, guys, as we start to wrap up this conversation. But Mel, so let me ask you this. Is there any message you feel to share with the body of Christ in this season?
Well, I think the thing that's been so prominent for us is this whole realm of loving one another and understanding that because Jesus lives in us, then when we're loving others, we are loving him. And so we don't have this disconnect between loving God up here through worship and prayer and, that type, and going to church. But as we connect with others, the love of God is flowing from one to another. And when that becomes real, man, it changes the relationships. It changes the value in the people that you spend time with. And for us, it's probably, that's the thing we're really passionate about is helping people embrace that and then start to find ways to live it. And then out of that flows the fruit. We see people that are getting healed, they're being made whole. They're coming together as a body with all the different parts functioning rather than just the mouthpiece or just the eyes of the prophet. It's seeing that the little toe and the kidneys and the arm and the feet and the hands, they're all so important. And I guess for us, that's what we've been just trying to do, is just get people activated to understand how that they have this value in the kingdom of God, and to come into that place of love and share it together. And it's so deeply fulfilling. But also about the ecclesia thing, and that's really been on our heart this year, is to come together, not just to love, as in to see relationships flourishing, but to start to govern and to start to see change in our world, because we are obedient to the command to love. Therefore, we have authority to become to start to govern what does our spiritual atmosphere, the things that are happening in our lives and the lives of people around us. And that's where impact on the world is so powerful.
Can you think of any stories around governing and like governing what's happening in your life, but also in those around you? Because what you're saying is so important, right? Like a lot of times people go family, and leave the governance out. Or especially in Pentecostal circles, we've seen a lot of governing and throw the family out. But there's a beautiful marriage, right? A fusion of the two.
Yeah.
Can you think of any example where you've ended up governing and something's happened? You got any story like that?
Yeah. And I mean, this is just stuff we're just starting to take hold of ourselves, and it really has to come from a place of listening to the Lord. So we don't just jump in and pray about anything. We're trying to sense what areas, when Jesus says your kingdom come, your will be done, we're wanting to hear, what is he wanting to do? What is he wanting to release? What is he wanting to bind? What is he wanting to see happening in these situations? So we've started this with the smallest of tasks, the smallest of assignments. I remember one day at work, we have a little ecclesia at work, just 3 of us that come together to pray, and we were waiting on funding to come through, and it was delayed, and it was integral to what we were doing. And it was, as we got together this day to pray, I felt the Lord just saying, take authority over this. And so we started to just pray and go, Lord, we're just asking for this approval to come through today. We need this, this has been held off for so long. And it was just there was just this real sense of, this is what we need to be asking for. And so we just came together and agreed in prayer. And honestly, I think it was 10 minutes. And this woman comes running into my office and says, I've just got this email. You're not going to believe it. The funding's been approved. It was just sitting on her desk, and we just said, Lord, bring it under, bring it to her attention today. And so it's little things like that where it's surprising. It was a surprise, but it was so cool, because we were just starting to get the vision for this. Wow, when the Lord wants to move, he moves. We participate with him in his will on earth. And so little things like that have encouraged us to keep going back and saying, okay, God, how are we going to pray into this situation? And what, taking authority over, just demonic stuff, and seeing things shut down immediately, especially if things start coming at your little family of faith, and it's often in waves or in patterns. And we'd see something going on, like a might be a spirit of contention or division or something happening, and rather than wait for it to happen 5 or 6 times before we wake up and go, man, something's going on here, we should pray about this. We're trying to be more sort of proactive and go, wait a minute, we've seen this twice. Let's pray about that, and it'll cease. So there's a friend of mine gave me such good advice. He said, Mel, you're not called to be a thermometer, you're called to be a thermostat. And I really love that, because it just totally redefines how we function when we're going out here and there. We're not just there to read the temperature and gauge the spiritual atmosphere. We're there to actually set the spiritual atmosphere and set the temperature. It's that's been the shift.
Yeah. And you said you get in your little ecclesia of 3, and we've all been trained that numbers is everything, and you need big numbers, right? So you're saying 3 people can have such an impact? Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Numbers? Fully, absolutely. When Jesus says where 2 or 3 are gathered, I'm there with them. To me, that's the blueprint. It doesn't take, you can't love on your own. So one is never going to be enough. I mean, you can be praying in your own personal prayer life to the Lord, but when you're coming together to function as an ecclesia or in a governance sort of way, you need love to flow. So 2 or 3, but that's enough. And it can be 2 or 3 in one situation, 5 or 6 is in another, 10s and 12s somewhere else. There's no formula for that. And I think that's what makes it so incredibly powerful, is that this can go out through the entire world, and the enemy has no way to shut that down, because it's happening everywhere in the smallest numbers all over the place. It's amazing design that the Lord came up with when he said, I will build my ecclesia. You don't need a church committee to make stuff happen.
Yeah, that is so good. And so can you run us through what that looks like for you guys? Like when you come together with your 3s or 6s, what's the kind of the rough outline of what that looks like?
Yeah. We don't have a formula for that. So we don't come together and go, okay, let's spend, the first 15 minutes we're going to do governing prayer. It's for us, it's so much more, it flows out of the love it flows out of the conversations. We might, like I meet with 2 ladies during the week, and we'll be sharing about what the Lord's doing in our lives, what's going on. And then the prayer will flow from that. And so it becomes obvious what we need to pray into. And it's so relational. We don't have a structured, we do have a prayer meeting on a Sunday night for our little group, but again, we just come together and we just share what's the Lord saying, what's he put on your heart, what are you noticing? We try to observe what what's going on in our lives and in the world, and we just pray out of that. So we're not we're not doing it in a formal kind of structured way, but it's just so much more flowing out of conversation.
So good. That's so good, man. Yeah, we got a question here. Someone says, as a lawyer, Mel, do you have any encounters in the courts of heaven? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I've read a little bit about the courts of heaven. I think it's a tool, and in some situations it can be a really effective tool. I've done a little bit. It wouldn't be something I do all the time, but if I feel prompted to by the Lord, then I might pray in that way. But I don't think that my earthly qualification has in some way given me special access into the courts of heaven. Of course, I understand a lot about legal protocols, but anybody can access the courts of heaven and pursue that sort of understanding. It hasn't featured as a huge part of what I feel called to do, but now and again it's come up and it's been useful. And and I love the whole analogy of Jesus being our defense counsel against the accuser of the brethren, God the judge. It's a beautiful picture, but it's probably not been a main thing for me.
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, that's the questions there done. Just as we wrap up, maybe I could get you to just pray with people. What do you think? Yeah, just pray with them about being comfortable in their own skin and enjoying this journey, because I think that I don't know if you realize the gold you carry and shared this morning, because it's natural to you, which is awesome. But this interaction that you have with the Lord and your willingness to walk through things that might be ugly or messy, and He's pulling you out the other side, and now it's a story. I think it's powerful. So yeah, if you could pray over everyone as we wrap this up, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, no worries. Love to. Yeah. Oh, Jesus, I thank you so much for every person that's been listening this morning and who will listen to this. Lord, I bless their lives. I thank you, Father, for your call of love on our lives. I thank you that you make it possible and you bring us to that place. It's not by our own efforts. And so I just pray that, Lord, you'd reveal yourself to each person who's been listening today, Lord, in a deeper way, and that, Lord, you just carry them into a place where they encounter you in a fresh way. I just pray that, Lord, we'd hear your voice and we'd follow you and love you wholeheartedly. And I thank you, Lord, for the unity that's growing in your body. Pray that we'd all learn to be who you've called us to be, Lord, that we're running a race, but not against each other. Lord, we're just running a race to win the prize, which is to love you and to experience your love in our lives. So I thank you, Lord, for this opportunity, and I just pray a blessing, and Lord, for your presence to be so real with each person here. Amen.
Amen. Boom. Well, there you have it, guys. You can check the caption. I put 2 links on there. We got the Free Slaves link and the One with Christ link, where you can get the books. And in the books website, I think you just type in free in the voucher code, right? Is that right? In the coupon or something like that, you type in free?
Yep. We'll reach out and we'll send them to you.
Yeah. And so the books will come to you for free, which is part of their calling. You can listen to Geoff talk about it yesterday, and Free Slaves is an amazing project too. You can check all of that out. But Mel, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It was awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been great. Bless you guys.
You stay with me, but everyone else, we're going to say goodbye. I'll see you on the next one.